Misfits, people ask me all the time about tools that I use in my life and business to maximize my success. I usually start by telling them one of my most powerful tools is my morning habits. And of course, they look at me somewhat confused. I then explain how important it is for me to center myself and how I begin my day and plan for my success. It's critical to consistent high performance. And it doesn't take me long, about 5 or 10 minutes, because I use a great resource called the 5-Minute Journal. The 5-Minute Journal is the simplest, most effective way I've ever found to start your day in the right mindset, doing the right things, and set yourself up for success. And it is exactly what it says, a 5-minute exercise you can do each day. Let me ask you, if you could reach your next level in your life and business by spending just 5 minutes of focused time a day, would you do it? I bet you would. And I know it works because I've experienced the power of it. And you can get your 5-minute journal simply by going to www.misfitentrepreneur.com/journal. That's misfitentrepreneur.com/journal. Do what I do. Use this amazing resource to give yourself an edge in your performance and your success. Get your 5-minute journal today.
Hello, Misfit Entrepreneurs. This is Dave Lukas, and welcome to another episode of the Misfit Entrepreneur, where it is our job to help you unleash your inner misfit and break through to higher levels of success, wealth, and fulfillment by bringing you the best insight and information from the world's top entrepreneurs, with a specific focus on their misfit side, the specific traits, habits, and secrets that have allowed them to thrive and succeed. As a reminder, if you are new to watching us on our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button below. Give this video a like and comment as well. We do our best to respond to all comments as timely as possible. This week's Misfit Entrepreneurs are Robert and Kaye Fukui. Robert and Kaye are former Fortune 500 standouts who saw an opportunity to help married entrepreneurs and business owners create harmony between the rigorous demands of building a business and maintaining a healthy, happy, thriving marriage. The company that they founded, Couples by Design, teaches entrepreneurs and business owners and their spouses how to have it all. A thriving business and marriage by helping them better understand themselves, each other, and how to support each other in business and at home. You know, I think as entrepreneurs, we all know the challenge of being responsible for a business and working to maintain that good environment at home. But the stats, they don't lie. Some estimates suggest that up to 48% of entrepreneurs get divorced. That's way too high, and it's a big problem. And speaking from experience, it's a lot easier to succeed as an entrepreneur when you have good support at home from your spouse or significant other. So I had to have Robert and Kaye on the show to share how you can thrive in this area of your life. So Robert and Kaye, are you ready to unleash your inner misfit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for having us on, Dave.
And I'm glad you're making misfits cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the dirty secret though, right? We're all misfits, right? Yeah. You know, we all have a uniqueness about us, and that's what sets us apart. And for entrepreneurs, it's that uniqueness that, you know, really creates great things, right? So that's what it's all about. And, you know, as I think about this topic, I think it is a very important topic to cover, because it is something that so many entrepreneurs struggle with. And I want to dig a lot into a number of things around it. But first, I know you guys, you kind of have your own unique story. You guys were both in Fortune 500. You guys, you know, kind of saw this need, but probably went through your own challenges in the way to be able to get to where you could help others. So take, 5 minutes or so and just tell us, how'd you get to where you're at?
Well, I know myself, I'm third generation entrepreneur. So I grew up in it, I breathed it, I lived it, and some of the challenges, I mean, there was a lot of great experiences we had, but some of the challenges were my dad worked 6 days a week, so he was hardly home at all. To this day, I don't know if he ever made it to my high school graduation. And a lot of times I hear entrepreneurs say, if they're having issues with finances, the go-to all the time is let's work more, put more work in, but we're not keeping track of what's working and what's not working as far as our numbers. And so sometimes just putting in more work does not take care of having more finances. And so our family really struggled from that.
So yeah, similar background. My parents weren't entrepreneurs, but my dad was a pastor. But running a church and building a church is the same as building a company or a business, because it's an organization and it's got people and it does take finances to run and grow. And so, experienced much the same thing. The focus was so much on the ministry that the family took a back seat. And then when I kind of went the corporate route, I got a marketing degree, and my first job out of college was with Coca-Cola. I remember just sitting on the middle of the sales floor one afternoon and just kind of watching people walking by. And, there's people, high achieving salespeople and managers and all that. And a lot of them been lifers, basically 20, going on 30 years. And I was looking at some of them like, yeah, they're not happy and they're not healthy. They're overweight, their teeth are bad, and they just seem like they're just bearing, putting in more hours in business sometimes just because they don't want to go home, so there's all these dynamics. And I'm like, okay, do I want to succeed professionally? Yes. But do I want to do it at the cost of what I'm seeing? Right. And so I was trying to be conscious about how do I do this thing different? And then is it possible to prioritize what's important, like your relationships and, your personal life, while you're being successful in business? And one afternoon, I was sitting in the branch manager's office. There's a few of us in there. We're just chatting around 5:30. And the regional manager, who also happens to have his office there in the same branch, walked by. He was on his way home. He picked his head in and says, "Hey, good night, gentlemen." And then he left because I knew he always wanted to be home for dinner. And so I remember as he left, the branch manager just made some snide comment like, "That loser, he's lazy, doesn't work, whatever." And then I'm looking, I'm like, wait a second, he's your boss. So obviously he's achieved from an achievement standpoint, obviously he's done a little bit better from that standpoint. And he's, as far as I can tell within the company, he's very well respected. And then I'm like, but he prioritizes home. And he doesn't feel the need to just keep grinding it out and work till 8 o'clock at night like our branch manager does. And so, just in that short period of time, I was like, okay, it is possible. I don't want to do that. I want to succeed professionally, but I don't want to give up my life and my family. And then I saw how someone could succeed, but still prioritize what's important. And so 8 years ago, when I left my last corporate job in pharmaceuticals to start consulting in business, they're hiring me for our marketing expertise. But as I start looking at the business, there's more issues beyond marketing that was causing them to work harder than they really needed to. And as you got to know the business owners, they start talking about their personal life, inevitably their marriage. And as like one client after another was sharing similar stories, which was connected to our own childhood stories. And I'm like, oh, this is a thing. There's like this elephant in the room that, man, I wish our life could be better at home, but we have to grind it out over here. And people didn't think that they could have both, even while they're building a business, and they felt they had to put so much time into it, and it was a sacrificing home. And that's when we not pivoted, but just went from just pure business consulting to just adding that piece of, hey, what are our priorities? What are our goals, big picture, not just our business goals, but what are our life goals? And how do we achieve that? Because as entrepreneurs, right, we're problem solvers, which is ironic. And when we see a problem in business or in the market, we look to solve it. And then, but at home, we see the problem, but yet we just think it's normal and that's how it's got to be. And so that's where I was like, wait a second, we can fix this. We're all achievers that are driven to fix problems. So why don't we fix this issue?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things you mentioned that actually lead into some of the topics I want to talk about. Kay, you mentioned something that kind of spurred a thought for me, and it's really true. Like, I'm from the Midwest, right? We've got what's traditionally called the Midwest mentality, which is like, if you want something done right, do it yourself, work long, hard hours to get to success, right? And it's just simply, it's just simply false. I mean, somebody can be a millionaire just posting videos on TikTok today, right? So like, it's a completely different, different world. But I think as entrepreneurs, we get into this trap of working for work's sake. And it's like, I've accomplished my whole to-do list and everything for the day, and I still got 3 hours left. Oh, I need to find something in work to do, right? Mm-hmm. That's where I think where kind of to your example of the guy who went home with his family, I'm sure he could have done more work that day if he wanted to, right?
Absolutely.
But he probably accomplished what he knew he needed to do that moved things along, and, prioritized family or, that home life. Right. And I think that's the line that we have to get good at as entrepreneurs, of spotting and then obviously making the right choices around. And with that kind of said, what are what are like the core principles of like couples by design with what you do? Like, what are the core principles that entrepreneurs need to understand to find this harmony between, business and that home life?
I think the first thing is you got to start with what is your shared vision for your life? What does your best life look like? And if you think 20, 30 years from now, okay, whether it's a home on the beach, taking more vacations, whatever, volunteer work, you name it. And then we bring it into the present and say, how can we start living some of that stuff out now? Now, we may not be able to have the finances to do exactly what we want to do in 20, 30 years, but we can, vacations, we can do staycations, we can take weekenders. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money just to disconnect, right? So that's an example of vision. What does our best life look like? And then how do we do it in the present? And then when we talk about work-life balance, what does balance mean to you as a couple? You got to define it for yourself, right? It's different for everyone. And you measure your balance by qualitative measures, not quantitative, right? It's the quality of time that you spend with each other. It's not how many minutes and hours that you spend, because we can waste a lot of time with each other just doing errands, but that's not quality time, right? They say, oh, we spend a lot, couples I hear, oh, we work together all the time and we're always together. That doesn't necessarily mean you're connecting as a couple and sharing your feelings and challenges and all that kind of stuff. But yet a couple that just spends 5 minutes a day like we do in the morning, first thing in the morning, to pray over each other or just connect and say, how are you doing? How can I help you? Right? That's quality time. So those 5 minutes sometimes are better than 3 hours of running errands. And so vision, defining balance, and then in the business, how do you get better margin in the business, both in time and money? So it's not just about working for more volume and just putting more time and hours and volume in.
It's not about like necessarily, oh, I got this to-do list, which we all have, and it's never ending. It's like, so what is your zone of genius that we can do to move our business forward? And it's usually something you love. We're doing the least amount of time of it, and it's something only you can do in the business.
Yeah, that's a great point. Again, entrepreneurs hear all this, I think, focus on your zone of genius, find others to do those things that, you shouldn't be doing and all that stuff. It's the act of doing it and giving it up. I think that's a big challenge for a lot of people, right?
The control issue.
It is letting go. But the thing that, like, and this happens more with small business owners, right? And or small teams, but entrepreneurs that have figured out like letting things go and ceding it to, others and empowering them, your business grows so much more. And yes, somebody's not going to do it exactly as you would have done it, right, or perfect the way that you may have done it, but it still gets done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what allows a business to be able to scale and grow and everything else. You have to be able to hand it off. You have to empower. Now, you need to develop good SOPs and you need to document. You got to do that stuff. But, if you're not willing to hand these things off and then empower others and support them to do it, even though they may not do it exactly as you had, right? That Midwest mentality I mentioned earlier, get rid of that. Then you get stagnant and it's really hard. Right. And then I'm sure creates problems at home too, because everything falls on you.
Yeah.
And
one of our clients,
that's not where you need to be.
You said it well, because I remember one of our clients, when we started working with them early on, I mean, the husband was on a verge of burnout and we were saying, hey, you got to scale back. You got to get back. And I remember him and his wife, they would brag about their team, what a great team they have and all that. And I said, why don't you let your team do more of the work? Like the things that you should take off your plate. And so it got to the point where he was basically on the verge of breakdown. And one morning he woke up, it was like he was at his limit. And he just walked into the office, told his wife, told the team, hey, you guys got to take care of this. I just can't. And so he finally scaled back, as basically his body told him, you have to. Basically, the body just started shutting down.
Yeah.
And a few months later, we're on our call, our coaching call, and he's like, yeah, I finally realized the less I do, the more things get done. It's like, yay!
Yeah.
And I'm glad it didn't land you in the hospital, but yeah.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean you just, you walk away. I mean, you still check in, I get the old adage, trust but verify, right? You still make sure things are getting done and stuff, but you can't be involved in it all.
Yeah. So that's
Kaye,
where that's where he was able to start going back into the zone of genius, spending most of his time in the zone of genius, mentoring the guys as opposed to managing the guys. And so that's where, that's a big game changer.
And that's I think I think every entrepreneur has to even schedule that reality check, for once a quarter, just to make sure that they are not drifting into those areas. Kaye, I've got a question for you, from your work that you guys have done. What would you say is the number one area entrepreneurs and their spouses or significant others have the most trouble, and why?
Well, I'd say in the business, usually it's the pricing. They're way underpriced and they're struggling. And then that affects the marriage because they don't have enough money. And then down the road, the kids don't want to take over the business because it's just such a struggle. So I would say that's number one. And then as far as the relationship, I would say resolving conflict. And that also feeds over into the business as well.
So talk a little bit more about resolving conflict. What does that, what does that mean? What type of things what are people going through that they need to do better in that area?
One of the things that comes to mind is making sure people are in the right seat. Because a lot of times a spouse will work some form in the business, whether it's full-time or part-time. But for us, as an example, we take people through the DISC profile to learn out what their skills are. Because for me, I'm more the creative, colorful type. Robert's more the analytical. And so we needed bookkeeping done. And so he's like, honey, can you do the bookkeeping? And I thought, oh, you know what? I wanted to be supportive. And I thought, you know what? I'm sure I could probably do this. I wanted to be the nice wife. And so I got in there to do the bookkeeping. And I kept putting it off. And Robert kept asking me, honey, have you got to it? I'm like, no, I'll get to it. And so finally I got around to doing it because, something you don't like, you're not really that excited about being proactive about. Got in there. I was working the best I could. And then Robert comes back to me and he's like, honey, all this stuff you did? I'm like, in the bookkeeping. He's like, it's not correct. And I'm like, what? I'm like, well, I did my best. And he's like, it's got to be exact. Then I got triggered because I'm thinking I'm doing my best. And it's not good enough for him. But he's wanted it to be perfect because, it's accounting. It needs to be perfect. Yeah. So we just kept triggering each other because I felt like I was doing his best and he felt like,
So how do you get out of that doom loop once it starts?
Cycle of insanity?
Yes, the cycle of insanity. So, number of different ways. One of them is if you're in the cycle of insanity, ask your spouse, what do you need? Because sometimes you might be surprised. We were having a discussion one time, and I was upset about something. I don't recall what it was. And Robert said to me, honey, what do you need? And I said, a hug. And he looked at me like, what? So he gave me a hug. And then I went on my happy little way. And he's like, wait, no. Is this a joke you're playing on me? He's like, it can't be. That's it.
Because basically, the way we communicate, especially when we talk about husband and wives, either when we're bringing up an issue, either we want a problem solved or we want to just be heard and need empathy. And generalizing, men like to solve problems. Women just want to empathize, want to speak, and just need to just to vent, right? And you just need to empathize and not have a problem fixed. But when we get into that cycle of insanity, whether it's in business or at home, a lot of times we're just not connecting on what each other needs. And so if Kaylee is raising an issue and I go in and problem solve, well, it just upsets her.
Because that's not what I want.
She's she I don't hear her. And I'm not really empathizing and really understanding her. I just want to solve her problem or fix her. And so that's just a prime example of a lot of times when we get in the cycle of insanity, arguments, endless loops of arguments, it's not usually about the issue at hand, the topic at hand. It's usually about some trigger we're getting, and it's usually about empathy versus problem solving. Those are usually the two dynamics. And there's some more subcategories to that. But those are the two primary things, as Kaylee was saying, if you can even preface it ahead of time is, honey, I just need you to listen, or honey, I need some feedback on this. Then I know solution or empathize. Or as Kaylee was sharing with that story, even if you're in the loop, okay, what do you need? And I'll clearly go down the wrong path.
Yeah. And a great example too, Kaylee. You know, I want to say, like, what are other common pitfalls that married couples run into in business? Like like we just kind of talked through one, like what others are common that you guys see, and how can they be avoided? Right.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest issue is just being able to resolve conflict, even in the business. So how to make decisions, right? And when you're husband and wife, right, if you guys can't come to common agreement to move forward, you don't move forward and you get stuck, right? So we've seen one of the primary issues that stunts the growth of the business in the husband and wife team is the fact they just can't come into an agreement. And so, I remember telling one couple one time, and we're like, look, what are you afraid of just moving forward with something, some common agreement? Because I said, if you're on the same page and just move forward together, even more likely than not, the decision's going to work out. But even if it doesn't work out, you're going to fix it, right? We can't guarantee that all of our choices and all of our decisions are going to work out. But when you're in agreement to move forward, even if it doesn't work out, number one, your relationship's going to be good and strong, and you're going to fix it. But if you guys are trying to go different paths, and one person decides to move forward when the other one didn't like it, whether the decision works out or not, the relationship is going to be strained, because the other person is going to be resentful. And especially if the decision doesn't going to work out, then all of a sudden it's finger pointing, right?
Right.
And so I said, there's no good outcome when you make a decision when you're split on it, but there's always a good outcome when you're in joint agreement, even if the decision doesn't work out in the business standpoint, because you're good, you're together, you did this together, and you're going to fix it.
That's really great wisdom and advice there. In fact, it's a great place. Because I want to talk a little bit about how mindset, conditioning, your thought patterns play into all this too. So we'll take a quick 1-minute break. We'll come back and dig into all that.
Misfit Entrepreneurs, I want to tell you about an amazing resource that will have tremendous impact on your business and your revenue. I have used this solution in multiple businesses, and it has made an incredible difference. Let me start by asking you something. Do you know how much it costs your business when just one salesperson doesn't step up to deliver? Do you really know? The cost can easily exceed 6 figures for just one bad hire, not just from the time, effort, and resources in hiring them, but from the lost business and downtime as well, as you have to go find a new salesperson and everything surrounding that. And the last thing any growing business can afford is to have a failed hire, especially in sales, the revenue driver for the company. But what if there was a way to know someone checked all the boxes of a great sales hunter and closer before you ever hired them? That's the solution that I found from a company called Sales Drive. They have created a solution called Drive Test. It's a powerful hiring tool that separates high-performance salespeople from pretenders by measuring the most critical personality trait needed for success in sales: drive. Drive is composed of 3 non-teachable traits shared by all top producers: the need for achievement, competitiveness, and optimism. And knowing who has drive before the interview dramatically increases your chances of selecting salespeople who will produce for you while avoiding those costly bad hires. I've used the solution and it works. In fact, it works so well, I've referred them to every company that I work with. And they've created a very special offer so that you can try them for free as well. You can get a free drive test assessment today at www.misfitentrepreneur.com/sales drive. That's misfitentrepreneur.com/sales drive, all one word. Start using the drive test in your hiring and never hire a bad salesperson again.
All right, so Robert and Kaye, how does mindset, how does conditioning really factor into creating harmony, and what should couples focus on in this area to thrive? Because I've talked about it many times on the show. One of my favorite topics is understanding our conditioning, how the mind works, understanding the thought patterns that are negative, recognizing them, choosing the thought pattern you want to have to replace it with, and then going to work. But that's a lifelong thing as an individual. You got to do that as a couple too, I imagine. So tell us about what you found in this area.
I said give your spouse the benefit of the doubt. You know what I mean? Because there's so much negativity, at least in my mind, that's going like, oh, he didn't do this or she didn't do that or, all these things. But if you just give him the benefit of the doubt, oh my gosh, it totally shifts my mindset. And then I try and look at the good things that he's done as opposed to all the negative stuff. Because there is a lot of positive things.
Yeah, I've done a few things good.
Done quite a few. I mean,
and I think it goes even deeper than that. You kind of touched upon it, but it's why do we see the world the way that we see it? Because as husband and wife, or just two people, we grow up in different environments, different households, and we've been conditioned, we have different experiences. So how we see things and how we hear and even interpret information is going to be different. And so that's also what causes conflict, right? Just misinformation. We're just disconnecting on how we interpret things. And so I think the mindset issue is understanding, even for me, each individual, is why do I get triggered because Kaylee asked me a question about business for some reason? Maybe I think she's being critical when she's not, but I just take it as criticism. So that's the one example is like, okay, where does that come from? And it always comes from childhood. And so for me is my dad didn't say a whole lot, but when he did, it was always in some kind of form of correction. Whether I didn't get, the right grades or I missed too many free throw shots in the basketball game, whatever, it was always in a form of correction or, majority of the time. And so when Kaylee starts asking me a question, it could be a totally innocent question, but I might lash out because I'm trying to defend myself because of that experience. And so that's, when you go into mindset, it's really understanding why is it that I'm doing this way, or why is it that I'm sabotaging the business, or whenever I see success, the next thing I know, subconsciously I'm undermining it, right? So the mindset issue, the way to help fix that is get to the root of the issue by looking at why do I do that, and go back into childhood and say, what are the experiences and the things that were said in childhood that kind of conditioned me to think this way?
and I'd say talk that over with your spouse. We've done a lot of that because then you understand them so much more. You're like, oh, that's why you don't like it when I ask you questions, because it triggers, the childhood when your dad would do X, Y, and Z. And then you have so much more compassion and understanding, and you're not taking it so personally.
Yeah, I mean, number one, you have to understand yourself, but number two, you have to understand your spouse and where things came from and what shapes how they think, the actions they do, and all that stuff. Now, as husband and wife, been married almost 20 years. There's always going to be things that can be improved upon on both sides, and how you approach that. And those discussions, I think that's where the good things really happen, if you figure out how to do that, because that really opens up that ability between you to come closer and really, once you know each other and stuff, it's much easier to say, hey, I know this, impacts you from childhood, but it's happening, and here's how it's affecting things.
Mm-hmm.
Can we work on that together?
Creating that safe space for each other to be able to talk about that stuff. And there's healing that comes from that as well.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And a lot, like I said, you get a lot more closer because of it. Speaking of like just that, like, creating the safe space when you need to and be able to do that. But you mentioned even at the beginning, you spend 5 minutes every day, just kind of, regrouping before the day starts, praying, that sort of thing. What are, some of the best daily habits that you do and that entrepreneurs and their spouses should practice?
Yeah. So I always ask people on a personal, for yourself and in a relationship, what are some things that you can do on a daily basis or on a regular basis, weekly and quarterly too, that will help strengthen the relationship, stay connected, and you can do regardless of how busy your business and life can get. And what's the bare minimum? And so I threw the 5 minutes out because that's the bare minimum connection time we can have and still be good, even if we go through a busy stretch. But in general, I have my personal time, I have my quiet time, I read, I kind of start the day a little bit slower, because there's also just medical research about rushing into the day that it increases the risk of heart attack. There's a big study that showed that the most common times for a heart attack is right around the 9 a.m. mark. And what they've shown as I dug into it is that when you go from a resting state and you start rushing today, it's very stressful on the heart. And so, what do people do? Typically, a busy entrepreneur, you go check your texts, your emails, and you start thinking about the day, right? And you get your coffee and you rush out. You take a shower, get dressed, and you rush out or whatever. Versus when you kind of slowly get into the day and start out of peacefulness, your heart acclimates and you're good. And also just physiologically, even mentally, you're better in emotional state to think clearly. You kind of know what's coming up for the day, and then you go. And so I've got my personal daily habits, first thing in the morning, my reading time, quiet time, and the prayer time, and the walk time. And then together we have our time usually about 15 minutes actually to pray and connect and all that. That's how we start the day. And then we have our date nights, and then we have our weekly meetings too.
I was going to say, this is weekly. We have our meetings, and it's huge for us. So we get together Monday at 3:30, and we give each other an encouraging word, which goes a long ways. And because it's always nice to hear something encouraging and to say something encouraging to your spouse. We go over our calendars, we sync that up, which so many couples I meet, they're like, oh my gosh, I never know what my spouse is doing. And I'm like, don't you sync up your calendars? And they're like, no, that's a good idea. We talk about our finances. If Robert's going to be traveling, I like to know ahead of time. I don't like to know like the day before. Oh, I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks. You know what I mean? So the expectation is set so I know what it is. So if he is going to be traveling, then we plan in something for when he gets back so that we can reconnect. We go over the business, how are we reaching our goals? Are we going in the right direction? Because sometimes it's so easily to get sidetracked, and it could be good things. And then when you look at your goals or your plan for the year, you're like, oh my gosh, we got way off track. And so then you're able to veer back on. And then it's exciting to talk about your dreams too at the same time together, because it's something you both came up with.
I was going to say, we've talked a lot about challenges, pitfalls, recognizing those things and how to work together. But you kind of mentioned kind of some of that there. It made me think okay, well, what's the other side of that? What are the advantages of, being married and running a business and possibly doing that together? What have you seen are some of the 1 + 1 = 3 type things that come out of that?
Oh yeah. I mean, exactly. 1 + 1 = 3. There's a lot of synergy when you're on the same page and you're just working, seamlessly together, so to speak. I mean, there's always going to be challenges, but when you know how to work things out and just keep moving forward, in business, right? We're always looking for, especially if you start solo, you're always looking for that perfect business partner sometimes, or someone that can come alongside you and run with you. I mean, who better than your spouse to do that with? Because you want the same things, right? We want the best for each other, because that means if she succeeds, that means I succeed too, right?
Right.
And who else is going to want to have your back? And so the most trusted person you can have is your spouse, because you all basically want the same thing. And so then it's just about formalizing what is it that we want, big picture. We kind of assume a lot of things, but there's a lot of things on the goals and stuff we each individually have on the fringes that sometimes we don't communicate. And that's what kind of drifts us apart a little bit. But when we get on the same page and understand what do we want to do as a couple, and what are some things we want to succeed as individually too, and how can we support each other in that venture, both in and out of the house. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, we're kind of living our best life right now, leaving corporate 8 years ago. I mean, I still keep in touch with some of my colleagues from 8 years ago. And, every so now and then they'll still say, so do you regret leaving? I'll go, no. Not only I love what I'm doing and the work we're doing, but just being able to do work and travel, because we, clients are all over the country. So we get to travel together too. And we love to travel. So we combine those two things, and I'm like, hey, this is great. And those are some of the things we worked out of how do we want to do our business, and how do we want to take advantage of when we do see a client that's somewhere else, that we have to travel to. So how would you take advantage of that? And so we just totally enjoy it, because and again, it's that constant communication of making sure that we're on the same page. And I think, that's.
And I want to say another huge perk is a lot of times we marry somebody opposite of us, and I remember it used to rub me kind of wrong, because Robert's so detailed, and I'm like, oh honey, there's plenty of wiggle room, let's put some color in here. And now I love it. I'm like, oh, like if I'm doing something that's really detailed, I'll have him look at it. Penny, can you look at this? So it's working within each other's strengths and just building synergy together. And it's something much better comes out of it usually than just working in your own strength, because there's only like, so many ideas.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on what you just said about coming up with great ideas. Like, again, a lot of times when we have disagreement, we have a little bit of differences of opinion, right? And then for this term compromise get thrown out a lot. The secret to great marriage is compromise. And I was thinking about it, and then even when I look at the definition of compromise, it's basically coming to agreement on less than great, on less than good, because you're kind of giving up certain aspects of your good ideas, right, to get to a common ground. And so I said, compromise, when you look at it, it's not a great solution. And then I said, you're just trying to carve it down to the bare minimum of areas that we connect. So why don't we just come up with the best solution? And let's just talk about it. And sometimes the best solution is my idea. Sometimes it's her idea. Sometimes it's
what?
Sometimes it's pieces. Sometimes it's pieces of both. And sometimes we come up with a totally different idea that's just better than either one of us had individually. And so it's always about what's the best choice and decision for us.
Yeah.
And
Kaye,
I remember
we got
when
that on record for you. So it's
thank you.
exactly. Yeah. Don't publicize that. Just edit that out. But so we're always looking for what's the best decision, not how do we compromise.
No, I think I think that's how it gets done in business, right? I don't know why like people are reluctant with like spouse, but like business, you get the best you can find in the room. You get to the best decision to move forward for whatever that need is, or that issue is, the problem is, or whatever you're trying to do, and you do it, right? So you should be excited with, either of you comes up with the best idea, right?
Exactly.
And that actually brings me to my last question for you before we get to your Misfit 3, and that's really new entrepreneurs, right? So what advice would you give new entrepreneurs or entrepreneur couples that are just starting out?
Just starting out. Well, I'll just say, don't fall into the same trap I did when I was starting our business, which is be busy. I mean, I fell into the busy trap when I started out, because I would ask people like, you run into a friend or whatever and say, hey, how you doing? The number one answer, or most common answer I got was busy. And I felt, I don't say busy, so maybe I'm not doing anything or not doing enough. So I became busy, and I started creating busy work for myself and working till like 2 a.m. in the morning. And it got so crazy. I'm like, this is stupid. And so I started to audit my time and where I'm spending my time. I'm like, well, there's some of these things I don't need to do. I can get to bed a lot earlier than 2 a.m. This is when I was still working my corporate job and was doing the consulting on the side. So I had to work the evenings. But still, even in that period, I said, instead of going to bed at 2 a.m., why not at 11? And so why don't I prioritize my time and do the most important things instead of just trying to do everything? And so I'd say the number one advice I would have is don't fall into the busy trap. To be productive, not busy.
And I would say, who do you know that you could get to come around you and help you with your startup business people? Because usually people are willing to help if you just ask and you get around the right people.
Yeah, both those points are, I think, so fundamental too. And obviously not just for new entrepreneurs, but for any entrepreneurs or entrepreneur couples. It's a great place to end it before we get to your Misfit 3. So we're going to do that. We're going to take just one more 1-minute break. We're going to come right back with Robert and Kaylee's Misfit 3.
Before we get into today's Misfit 3, I want to take a minute to talk to you about a free resource available to you from the Misfit Entrepreneur, the Misfit Minute. The Misfit Minute is the free weekly resource packed with useful tips, tricks, and information from the world of Misfit entrepreneurs. It not only includes further resources on the week's Misfit Entrepreneur guest, but additional links, articles, and resources to help you be more successful. It's delivered every Friday to your inbox. To sign up, all you have to do is go to the homepage at www.misfitentrepreneur.com and you will see the Misfit Minute sign-up page. Don't miss out on this great resource and all it has to help you. Sign up today and look for it this Friday.
Okay, it's time for Robert and Kaylee's Misfit 3. These are the 3 things that they want you to take that you can put in your life, your business, make a difference for yourself starting today. And the way that I always frame this to every guest that comes on the show is I say, hey, look, if you're going to leave this earth tomorrow and you can only leave behind your 3 best pieces of wisdom, to for the generations that come after you to help them live their best life? Like, what are those 3 things? So, Robert, Kaylee, whoever wants to go first, go ahead.
Go ahead. Honey.
Number one starts with boundaries. The reason why our life gets out of whack and out of balance, out of harmony, whatever you want to call it, is because our life just gets blended. And what happens is we spend to focus most of our energy on the things that we view as what leads to success. In our case, business, achievement, money. And then the other stuff that we say are priorities, our relationship, takes a back seat. So we got to establish some boundaries on, when is it at some point you got to disconnect from business so you make sure you prioritize at home. You got to, instead of answering texts and phone calls at the dinner table, take those off. So that way when you're home and when you're with your loved ones, you can be present, right? Because a lot of times, even when we're home, we're not even present. So those kind of healthy boundaries will help, even in the midst of however busy work can be. You're always at home at some point, right? And so how do we make that count? So the boundaries, setting those hard boundaries and say at a certain point, you just can't do business, I think is going to be very healthy. And your customers and your clients respect that too.
I'd say don't go to bed angry. Get things resolved before, because I know myself, I've let things go. And then, oh my gosh, it's just like a big snowball that just keeps building and building and building them. And then I'm upset about him, about everything under the sun, whether it had to do with him or not. And my blood is boiling. And you guys, it is so bad for yourself, for your health. So get it resolved. At least get it to a peaceful place. You might not have it resolved, but to a place where you can pick it up another time, another day, where you have a time and a day planned where you can sit down and talk about it.
So that's 2 things. We can do one more, or you can each add another one. If you want to do 3 each, go ahead. So what would you prefer?
I'll have one. Do you have another one in mind?
I was going to say, don't sweat the small stuff, you guys. So many things we can just let go. Does it matter if I tell people, does it matter if the toilet paper is over or under? Hey, I'm happy just as long as there's toilet paper in the bathroom, okay? So
fortunately, we both like it over, so that just sealed the deal to get married. So anyways, and I always say, think margin, not volume. So whether it's in, your personal life or in business, we're always talking about, they hire us for more sales. They want more sales, more sales, more sales. The first thing we look at is how to get more margin. How do we increase our profitability without having to just chase sales? So where can we raise prices or be more efficient, so reduce our costs? So the more margin we have, the less volume we have to rely on to get to a healthy net, right? And then also in our time, same thing. As a business owner, where should we spend the time that's most productive, that gets the best outcomes without having to put more time and more hours in? Just even like at home on a personal level, I'm starting to mentor some young entrepreneurs. And so I can do one-on-ones, but I just decided, hey, let's come to a group and let's meet once a month for coffee, right? So I created this mentorship group. Now I can help more guys, but I get margin out of it because I don't have to meet with everybody individually. So think of things like that, of how to create more margin to get greater outcomes without having to spend more time in it. So that goes in your personal life or in business.
Now, those are all great, guys. And that last one too, it's like, it is margin leverage, right? Finding ways to do more with less, right? That's, I think, something that does apply to all areas of life. If people do want to learn more about you, where should they go?
So yeah, just go create
welcome, Faith. Just for your podcast.
I neglected to mention it too. You guys have a really great podcast and everything too. So please tell people where that is and everything.
Yeah, just go to marriedentrepreneur.co/misfit. So we created specific landing pages for you. So there's just 3 choices. There's our free guide on work-life balance that you can download, or there's a connection to our podcast, Thriving in Tandem. Or even if you just want to chat with us, there's a link for that too.
Excellent. We'll connect to that in the show notes, the best show notes in the business. No offense, for reasons I will talk about more in a second. But first, for those of you that are new to the Misfit Entrepreneur, it's your first episode with us, welcome. It's such an honor to have you with us. And I hope you become a regular listener and subscriber. And for those of you that are with us week in and week out, I cannot thank you enough for your support of the show. You are what makes this go in over 100 countries every single week. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And make sure and go out and check out the show notes for the episode. They are the best in the business. Why? Because I do them myself as part of my personal growth routine, my habits. Every week I go back through these episodes with great guests like Robert and Kaye, and I share my best insights and things that I'm taking away from them with you. So go check those out and then give this episode a rating and review. Help share Robert and Kaylee's message, because, and I say this in every episode, we all know one great episode can change someone's life. Maybe something that they shared today was that missing link you were looking for to get to your next level. So go share this with others. And again, Robert, Kaye, thank you so much for all your wisdom and insight today.
You're welcome. Thanks,
Thank you
Dave.
for joining us, Dave.
Yeah,
It was great.